Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Real Talk Family Life, building shatterproof families one brick at a time. We encourage you to invite others to come and engage with us as we discuss part three of the role of separated parents in their children's lives. We're really excited about this topic because it is a topic that touches each and every one of us in some regard, and we would like to at least provide you with some tools to help you address the issue, or at least help someone as they're experiencing the issue of parenting while being separated. Um, the objectives for this evening are first, the psychological impact. We want you to understand that the psychological impact on children due to separation of parents is real, and that this impact certainly has a bearing on our child's or children's well-being. Secondly, we want you to understand that about the importance of both parents being vigilant and intentional about setting clearly defined goals, agreeing upon their roles in their children's lives, and understanding that their roles are pertinent to their children's well-being as separation does impact a child's life. We have as our panelist this evening, along with the host, Pastor Anthony Henry, who is the pastor of Faith Tabernacle in St. James, Trinidad. And I'm going to have him introduce himself because, there may be someone in the audience who does not yet know much about you. And then we will proceed with our discussion for this evening. Pastor Henry.
So, thank you, Dr. Neff. And I'm really, well, as Dr. Neff said, I'm the pastor of Faith Tabernacle. I've been there for a number of years. Gosh, I don't want to think about them because as I look at myself in the camera, I can't believe that those years have rolled by so quickly. God has been good. Been there since 1983. So this last year would have been about 40 years. 83, 23, 40 years, 41 years. So God has been good. And this is a subject that interests me as I researched and looked at it this week. Really enthused with the information that came up. It's very, very important. It is very, very important.
All right, thank you, Pastor Henry. And I just want to set the stage for the discussion today because oftentimes when we hear the word separation, we think of divorce. But you need to understand that separation can come in different forms. Yes, divorce is one of those forms. The other could be through relocation. Maybe one parent has to relocate for work purposes, or to help establish the family financially and so forth, but there's that separation due to relocation. There may also be separation due to loss of a caregiver, right? Whether it's through death or some medical condition that makes that person incapacitated in some regard. But those are just some of the examples through which separation can come about. So let's zero in on divorce as the only form of separation, but consider that there are other reasons why parents may be separated, but you still have to co-parent the children as they grow and are still responsible for their children's physical, mental, psychological, and spiritual well-being. So we are going to start with the first question that we have for you this evening, Pastor Henry. And that question is, what are the key physical, mental, psychological, and spiritual well-being? So we are going to start with the first question that we have for you this evening, Pastor Henry. And that question is, what? Okay. We have a little.
Yes, I think. Yeah, I think I've taken care of it, so we should be good.
Thank you.
Good.
The first question is, what are the key psychological impacts that separation can have on a child's well-being, and how can parents and caregivers help mitigate these effects?
before I jump into the psychological impacts, Dr. Neff, I think if I make us aware of a particular situation in our world, how that situation started, or if I relate the history of that situation, and to see that it was simply because parents, good as they may have been, were not able to manage this whole thing about separation properly. And as a result, today our world is in chaos, serious chaos. And I'm referring to the events that are taking place in the Middle East. And the historical events should remind us of the immediate long-term impact that separation of a child or children from parents can have on the family. And so I'm going to share my screen and ask you to just listen for a while to the history of the origins of those two warring nations in the Middle East at present. So I'm talking about Israel and the Arab world. So I'm going to share my screen and ask you just to listen as we, so I'll go here, share screen, share song, share.
Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai his wife took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your slave is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think best." Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" "I am running away from my mistress Sarai," she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel added, "I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count." When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him, as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." And she added, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." The child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. And she said to Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. But God said to him, "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring." Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, She put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. And as she sat there, she began to sob. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer.
Okay, so so the story, I think you know the story quite well, but having heard it, I hope that you have given some serious attention to it. So there are three things that I note in the passage with Sarah and Abraham and Hagar. First, there is abuse, Sarah's abuse of the slave girls. Ishmael disdain. I'm seeing Ishmael disdain for favoritism. And I'm seeing Abraham's role as a people pleaser. He simply just wants to please everybody. And so when parents separate their children, when there's separation, family separation, and as Dr. Neff said, there are a number of things that can cause separation. When there's separation, we have to look at the factors that lend themselves to the separation. When you have separation like the one that we are seeing with Abraham and his children, there could only be trouble. And the animosity that Ishmael carried for Israel, for Isaac, and eventually the children of Israel, Ishmael became the Arab nation. And the animosity continued. And that simply because somehow you have a situation where parents are not willing to accept the fact that, you know, this is our children. The interests of the children are not foremost. And when those interests become foremost, they become foremost for the wrong reason. For people's selfish reason. And so we need to understand quite well that separation will take place, parents will be separated, but the children should always be the center and the focus of both parents to ensure that the child or children are best taken care of. So I don't know if you wanted to come in, Dr. Neff, before I continue.
Well, I totally agree with what you've shared so far, Pastor Henry. A few things that I'd like our audience to understand with separation. Whenever there's a separation, it can be a very traumatic experience for the children. And that trauma could definitely be something that carries on into the adulthood and can bring about anger and can cause what we see happening with these two brothers. The emotional distress that some children experience due to separation can be very severe, and it could manifest itself in sadness. They may look very sad, or maybe anxiety, and most definitely anger can become part of that as well. Mm-hmm. They may not start off angry, but they may eventually become angry, and that's where that turmoil comes in that can impact how they function even in adult life. Because children experience trauma due to separation, they may find it very difficult to emotionally attach to others because that fear of being separated, that fear of being discarded is always there. So they may avoid um, developing long-lasting relationships because of that fear of separation and loss. So you may find that there may also be some behavioral changes. It may affect them academically. Their schoolwork may suffer. They may be so traumatized and distracted that it may be difficult for them to focus even in school. And the long-term effects may be, pretty long-lasting, right? As we've seen, we're talking about decades, hundreds of years of the turmoil between these two brothers. And it's also important to know that some children, though, may develop resilience. They may adapt well. Not all children will experience what I shared initially. Some of them may adapt well to that experience, and they may adapt to the separation well enough to where they become resilient and they become fortified and they're able to thrive and learn to establish strong supports and strong relationships through other means, maybe other caregivers, maybe a teacher, maybe someone else, another family member who may provide that emotional support for them. So while kids may come out of this resilient, in general, most children, due to separation and the anxiety and the trauma that may be associated with this, may have those long-term effects that may impact them even into adulthood.
So one of the types of separation that we see in the Caribbean, and I think that we have become accustomed to it. They have given it the name. They have called it those children who face that type of separation of one parent or both parents. They have come to call them the barrel children. That is where parents would leave their children in the Caribbean with a family member or some guardian and go overseas in order to seek to enhance a better way of livelihood. The psychological impact on children of those separated parents is more profound, is very profound among the region's barrel children. Sadly, less attention is paid to these young ones who have been left to be raised by retired grandparents or sometimes relatives who care more about the Western Union collection than the children themselves. Before I mention some of those impacts, I lived through that particular phase of being a barrel child. When I was about 12 years of age, both of my parents, my father had already migrated to England, and my mother followed the year that I sat what is now the common entrance. And I could remember writing to her when the results came out that I had passed for the boys' grammar school in St. Vincent. It was the most prestige school. It was the best. But I had passed for that school. She left me, however, when she left, like all of us, where, during the holiday period, you have to be doing some trade or some working in the field or something. And so I decided that I wanted to learn tailoring. During the holidays, I wanted to learn tailoring. And the gentleman that I was learning tailoring with, although, it was a situation where I was more learning how to walk the hills to go get him his meals at lunchtime and what have you. Just the money came from England to buy books and clothes to go to the grammar school. My grandmother with a gentleman in the area took me, I remember, to the school to get registered and what have you. But that week, the gentleman gave me 25 cents, paid me 25 cents for the week. And I never saw the grammar school. Never saw the grammar school. My grandmother didn't have the strength and the ability to make me go. She was getting down in age. And, you know, that almost wrecked my entire life. It almost wrecked my life. And so for 2 years, almost 3 years, when I went to secondary school, I was, things had gone so bad. My brother and I, we had become very out of control, real troublesome in the community. My brother at one time was arrested for almost killing a man. Not any fault of his, but that's where it had gone with us. And so our parents decided that they would send us to live in Trinidad with an uncle and aunt. And so I went back learning the trade of tailoring. I told him, I was doing tailoring, let me go back and learn tailoring. My brother went back to school. And here am I learning tailoring with another gentleman in Trinidad, and going through the same situation. And I'm repeating my story so that you would understand the impact that children who are separated from their parents, the impact that they face. And so I'm back with this gentleman, and for those of you who know Port of Spain, the tailor shop was on Observatory Street in Port of Spain. And every day I had to walk to St. Babs to get the man's lunch and bring it back to Observatory Street for him. And when I saw children going to school, I told my aunt who I was living with that I wanted to go back to school. And thank God back then they had private secondary schools. And so at the age of 15, I would be in Form 1 in a private secondary school. By 18, I was writing the GCE O-level exams. And thank God that somehow, without salvation, without Christ, like Ishmael, God made a way and put me in a place, even though I found myself wrapped up into all kind of crazy things like the Black Power movement and what have you during those early years of my life. If it wasn't for God, I would not have been where I am today. And I see all of that. I don't blame my parents as such. I don't hold it against them. I think what they did, they meant well. Things were rough with all of us financially. I remember those days. And they saw a way to do what they were doing for us. The point I'm making about is that when children are separated from their parents, they are going to suffer. And separation and subsequent disruptions in their home life can lead to a decline in their, as Dr. Neff said, in their academic performance, as it happened with mine. And one of the things that creeps into many a times into these children's lives is the identity challenge, the challenge of the identity, feelings of insecurity. Mm-hmm. Children will question their worth, wondering if they did something to cause the separation or if they're less valued. And this can lead to low self-esteem and anxiety, especially if the separation is accompanied by a sense of abandonment or by one of or both parents. So that the impact on the child can be severe. For me, my self-esteem got turned around after a while. You know, I was in school, attending school, and if you know what the 70s were like, the 60s rather, if you know what the 60s were like, the complexion of your skin told you exactly where you are going to be off in the society. And somehow, I mentioned a while ago, the Black Power movement came into my life, and thank God, for some reasons, it came for a good reason. It somewhat created a sense of purpose. It helped me to understand that, my color, nothing was wrong with my color. And so, as I said, God is working, but all of these feelings, all of these negative feelings develop in the life of the child. Now, put that now in the life of a child whose parents are separated and left in a community where there is gang violence, left in a community where there is issues, economic issues, and those whom he's living with cannot provide the kind of things that he needs, he or she needs, and there is somebody on the block who is willing to monopolize that situation, to take that little tender mind and use it. And you see why many of our young people into crime and into violence and all of these different things, because they cannot always deal with the impacts, the mental health challenges and the social challenges that these children who do not have their parents around to give them that sort of a guidance that they face. So that you may be thinking at one time, and I at one point in time, I felt that I needed to do like my parents, and there we go, because there was a time I went through that period of financial difficulties, and I thought that I can do like other parents who were going to the United States and trying to get make a living so they can try to get their children to the United States. And that thought was seriously considered, contemplated at one point in time in my life. And I'm glad that I made the decision. And when I remember what I went through as a young person by my parents going to England, I decided, if my children are going to die, I am going to die with them. I'm not going to allow that separation. I'm not going to separate myself. And I'm glad today that I didn't, because I stood there, because the God who was able and who is able, he took care of us during the hard times and found a way to get us out of the situation that we're in. So that children of separated parents, they can face all of these psychological impacts as the barrel children, and other factors that may include mental health challenges. And so in the absence of parental guidance, we have children have a higher risk of developing symptoms of anxiety and depression. And so the material things, definitely from overseas, cannot replace the need for the emotional and support and affection and the daily interaction with parents. And so I would suggest that, we should think, those of us who probably have fallen into a situation where we have children one place like Abraham and children another place, that we should think seriously about the impact and all the things that I've just mentioned that can affect the lives of those children, and try to put ourselves in a place where we can alleviate those problems for our children.
Thank you, Pastor Henry. There is a question in the chat. Based on the story in Ishmael's case, how do you reassure a child who was suddenly stripped away from his or her parent due to separation of relationship, especially from their father, that their father loves them all the same?
Yeah, that I'm trying to keep it within the context of the story. The father may want to do what is the right thing to do, but the wife would not have any of it. In the first place, you think of Sarah. This woman is my slave. I can't have a child. I cannot have a child. I am too old. I am too old. Go sleep with her so that the child will be mine. And probably that should cause us to think about this surrogate thing that is taking place in our world today, right? So that you need clear decisions clear, somehow proper agreements as to how you are going to operate with this child, so that my current wife doesn't have any children. And several times she may have mentioned, would you adopt a child? I say, let's work the agreement out. Because it's not easy. It's not very easy to have somebody's child and just not understanding that when you take that child doesn't remain somebody else's child. It becomes your child. And when you adopt that child, that parent, or if the parents are alive, you still have to have some sort of for the well-being of that child, you still have to have some sort of an agreement with the parents of the child as to how they are going to impact on the life of the child. Now, Sarah didn't think anything about it. All Sarah wanted was a child. She got, even before she got the child, I don't want this child anymore. So let's put away this one. Let's go look for another woman, and you're going to have another child with another woman. And people can't operate that way. So that one of the big problems there in that relationship, and you could see it all along, it was Sarah's selfishness towards wanting a child. And I would wonder if it is that reason why God kept her until she got to 90 years of age before he given her one. Yeah, somebody may say that, it's the God, I don't know what was in the mind of God, but somehow the whole concept there of not treating the child well, the way how she went about not treating this child well, should teach us that we should be, if we are getting into this whole thing about surrogate children, or if we are going to take somebody else's child for adoption, we should treat that child as ours. It's a child. And treat that child, you have to be able, if you are going to accept that child, to treat that child as yours. Just like if the child is actually yours. And I think that is where Sarah would have gone wrong. And the problem is that the person who suffered was the mother of the child and the child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in the long term, people are still because of that decision.
You're right. In the long term, God seems to be works always by the natural law of sowing and reaping. So that after Israel is made such a powerful nation, after a while, it's the same Arab nation in Iran that took them into in Iraq rather, that took them into captivity into Babylon. And they remained almost 2,000 years in captivity before they were given that piece of land again in 1948. And it's less than 100 years, and they have reverted to the same attitude. Let me kill Ishmael. Right, the same attitude. And so one of the truths that need to be brought there is something that we say all the time, is that the child, how do we put it, boy? Something doesn't fall too far from the tree.
Yeah.
Yes. So that you are going to pass on all of this into your child. Your child is going to see your behavior towards others, and that is going to continue. And thank God, and I think it was in the book of Ezekiel, it was Ezekiel who said, as God, I am not going to punish another. If a group decides to change their ways, I will not punish them for the sins of their fathers. And I think that is where we, as Christians, need to understand what transformation is all about. And so that we need to help people to understand that you are not under this, what they call this generational curse that cannot be broken. It is only through Christ that it can be broken in Christ because he became the curse for us, and that whatever mistakes our parents may have made, we shouldn't think that we need to be making the same mistakes, that Christ can change those for us. So that Sarah should be a good example for us to ensure that we do not make the same mistake as Sarah.
Mhm. Thank you. So the takeaway from this question, the discussion of this question, since many children will experience the trauma of separation and the impact may be severe, the takeaway is that as parents who co-parent children through separation, must endeavor to provide a stable, supportive environment for those children. One that fosters open communication, and that there may be times when you may have to provide counseling for these children, depending on how they're able to emotionally cope with the separation, because counseling may help to mitigate some of the effects and certainly help them learn to grow some healthier coping mechanisms, ways so that the impact of separation may not be as severe on them. But it has to come from the parents being committed to have as much as possible, a stable, supportive environment so the children know that they're not at fault, they're not the reason, that the love that parents have for them is still there and will continue, and that they will be supported no matter how severe the impact of separation may be on their lives. All right, I don't see anything else in the chat. I want to encourage you, if you have questions, go ahead and put it in the chat or raise your hand so we can certainly call on you to ask your question. I'm going to move on to question number 2.
Dr. Neff, just before you jump there, probably have another point also just to
Go ahead.
mention.
Yes, by all means.
So that with one of the things that you have to look at with children who are separated from their parents is the whole idea of our relationships, because these traumatic events through abuse and neglect tend to cause children to develop mistrust.
Mhm.
And trust is the foundation on which all relationships are built. And if the child may have witnessed any form of aggression and so on between the parents during the relationship, the child may very well model that form or behavior.
Mhm.
And because they do not have that trust issue, some of their response may be from their own minds.
Mhm.
And so we see a lot of violence in the society. And oftentimes it's not the child that is not just the nature of the child to be violent, but it's more about self-preservation, protection, and so they hit before they're hit. And so they carry the idea it is better to hurt others before they hurt me. There are a lot of people who live with that sort of attitude, and if you get to the bottom of it, you would realize that in childhood that they develop these tendencies because they face situations that created mistrust. Right. Some of the if you looking, as Dr. Neff said, I quite totally agree. You know, counseling is important always. It's better to seek professional help. But if you are looking on and you are seeing, you know, some of the signs that are symptoms that you can look for, that can tell you that the child who may be in an environment where he is separated from one parent or another, to some of the symptoms that may help you to understand that the child is having problems. Some of the emotional symptoms would be if this child is suffering from anxiety, worries about the future. When he talks, he doesn't have any hope of tomorrow. Speaks about a fear of abandonment, of fear of losing a parent's love, he has that symptom of anxiety may display that symptom of anxiety. If the child is always sad and depressed, crying frequently, withdrawal or feelings of helplessness, that's another symptom that that child may suffer. Outbursts, angry outbursts, hostility towards one or both parents, or blaming themselves or others may be another symptom that you can recognize that would be visible in the child that is suffering because of some form of separation with the parent. Guilt, belief that they're responsible for the separation. You listen to some children talk and the parents are separated and they're blaming themselves for the parents' situation. And then they're always confused. They may have difficulty understanding the situation or mixed feelings about their parents. And so in talking to them, you recognize those sort of symptoms, then it's time to try to get them to talk to somebody who can assist them professionally.
Indeed. Those are some really good strategies. And you know, I really like that you shared some of the symptoms that one may observe in these children, because again, you may not know, the child may not tell you, but when you observe these symptoms, you have to begin to think about, okay, what's going on? And usually you'll see a marked difference in the child's behavior from before the separation and after. And when you see those symptoms, that's your clue to start looking for ways to help mitigate the impact of separation on the children. All right. I'm looking in the chat. I don't see any other questions, but again, if you feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you. Okay, so can we go on to question number 2?
Yes.
All right. This is a long one, and it's a 2-part as well. Why is it crucial for separated parents to clearly define and agree on their roles in the child's life? And how can they ensure consistent co-parenting while respecting each other's boundaries?
Yeah. I wonder if the world would have been different today if Hagar appreciated the grace that God had granted to her to be the surrogate for the man through whom God would bless the world. And what if Sarah did not allow her emotions and poor sense of reasoning to get the better of her? How many more women would your husband have to sleep with so you can have a child of your own? So that where there is separation, there should be clearly defined agreements between the parties for the following reasons. 1, to manage conflict. It is likely that conflict caused the separation. And as adults, you should be thinking about the child and realizing that you must manage conflict. So your agreement on responsibilities would minimize conflicts between the parents. These conflicts, arguing and what have you, if you have some sort of an agreement, you would realize that these conflicts would not be as distressing and harmful to the child. My father and mother had an agreement. I did not know about it, but it's as I grew older and I'm married that I realized that that agreement existed between them. That is, they never expressed any sort of anger to each other. They never argued with each other in front or before their children. All right. Some time ago, I was speaking to my daughter and she said, I never see you and mommy quarreling. Well, It's not that we never quarreled, but we never quarreled before the children. We never argued before the children. And I would say that when you have had to separate, when you have had to have some sort of a separation, and because you can't agree, be it on the financial matters and what have you, agree on this one principle: we are not going to wash our dirty linen in the face or in the public where our children reside. Right, so have an agreement on conflict management. You need to understand that there must be some sense of emotional security. When parents work together and communicate effectively, the child feels secure and supported, even in a separated family structure, so that you need to create that emotional security for the child. And so you have to work and you have to learn to communicate. Somebody said that the greatest form of communication is listening. And when you are able to listen, to understand with the intent to, or you listen with the intent to understand what the person is saying instead of responding to what the person is saying, you realize that you manage conflict even better and that the communication becomes even more effective. So let me say that again. In communicating, the key is to listen to what the other person is saying. And the key in listening is to listen to understand what the other person is saying. I had just learned the principle, and one day these Jehovah Witnesses folk came to my house, and when the guy started, I said, "Listen to me, sir. I am an atheist. I don't believe in God." And he started to read out what have you for me and so on. So I said to him, now, if I can convince you that there isn't a God, would you listen to me? Would you want to hear what I have to say? Well, that ain't the truth, so I don't have to hear that. I don't have to listen to that. That is garbage and what have you. So I said, sir, have a wonderful day. And the point is that sometimes we think that we know what is right. We think we know what is the truth, and the other person can tell us nothing to make us change our minds and to listen to what they have to say. Maybe so that they may not be able to change our minds, but out of respect in conversing with others, we should be able to, we should take the attitude that I want to understand what you are saying. And so if you weren't doing that when you were married, if you were doing that when you were together as parents, the relationship may have lasted. But in as much as you missed it, and as much as you failed to do it, for the children's sake, I beg of you, when there is an issue to be discussed, make sure that you are listening purposefully to what the other person is saying, not just to respond to what they're saying, but to fully understand. And somebody took it a little further and said not to just understand, but to feel what they're saying, because people speak in emotional terms. And so it's better when you feel, you understand how a person is feeling when they speak to you. When you get to understand their feelings, when you get to feel how what they're saying, you can enter into their feelings. You can, like Jesus, have compassion with them. It is only then that you can express what it means to love and to care for what that person. And so I would say in communicating, be very understanding and to seek very much to do just that, what the person has to share with you. And there must be balanced support. And so when you define the roles to ensure both parents contribute meaningfully to the child's upbringing. so that it is now my child. Because the child is living with you, I can't tell the child how to live and what have you. And for some reason, as I've been saying, these are kind of things that separate parents because you want to bring up the child in one way and the other way the person may want to bring up the child. And the reason for that, both parents may have different parenting style. One may be very, where you open and listening to the parent, and one may be very where you lay down the rules, you stick by the rules, that kind of a thing. And so you want to make sure that you try to understand where each others are at, and you make sure that you contribute to the child's upbringing. You address, so you're contributing to the child's emotional, educational, and financial needs. And above everything else, you need to model parenting for the child. This child is going to become an adult and is going to become a parent. And so you want to model that behavior as to what you think is right for a parent. You want to make sure that the child behaves in the same way. I usually have a question for couples who are not married when they come to do the pre-counseling for the dedication of the child. And so I am always happy when there is a girl and the guy is there. I would always ask the question, now, sir, how would you tolerate a man who would make this your little child pregnant before marrying her? And oftentimes I see the embarrassment, I see the the kind of trying to duck out without answering, that kind of a thing. But as parents, we should always be thinking about the child. What sort of a model are we laying down? What sort of a pattern are we setting for our children so that they would follow? And so we should set healthy example of collaboration and respect for the child, fostering a sense of family unity despite the separation. Go ahead, Doctor.
You said a mouthful. Man, oh man, that is awesome. You know, what I would add to that is, and you've kind of shared that as well, is that the focus should be on the child. And if separated parents could agree on that one premise, the rest going forward should fall into place. The focus, there should be a shared focus on the child and the child's well-being, and on aligning everything that the parents do so that they can work together for the stability of that child. And by stability, I mean their physical, their mental, their emotional, their psychological, their spiritual stability, because that's the ultimate goal, right? The well-being of that child in all those different areas. Conflict will always be there and may always be there, but if they establish a way of communicating and listening, being a key part of that, and not just listening for what the parent is saying, but we need to avoid responding to what we think we hear them saying, right? Really listen to what that parent is saying, and listen with the expectation of minimizing misunderstandings and minimizing conflict. Having that united approach is a challenge for everyone, even for parents who are not separated. Because as Pastor Henry mentioned, we come from different parenting situations, right? How you were raised and how I were raised, I mean, entirely be different. But if we can agree on a way to raise our children, that may be a combination of the two or maybe entirely different. If we can agree on how the child should be raised or the parenting styles we would adopt to raise that child, that may help, right? But again, it's challenging even for the parents who are in the home with the children. Respect is also very important. When with separated parents, now you have two different households, two different lives, two different everything. And respecting those boundaries may be a challenge. But again, if the best interest and the focus is on the child, what's best for that child, respecting those boundaries is critical. And it's critical because, as I mentioned some time ago, you cannot criticize the other parent to the child, because when you criticize the other parent, you are in essence criticizing the child, because that child is half you and half the other parent. And we have to be very mindful about how we denigrate and disrespect the other parent, because we are hurting the child more than we are hurting the other parent when we do something like that. So respect is also very important, and establish those boundaries and try to stick within the lines. It may be challenging, but we can certainly work towards doing that. And if all else fails, and it's very difficult to avoid conflict, and it's very difficult to avoid those pitfalls, you may seek professional guidance, whether it's a spiritual guidance or psychological or psychiatrical guidance. You may have to seek guidance to help you navigate those challenges and to avoid those pitfalls, so that you can focus on co-parenting the child before the child becomes an adult. Because by that time, you've already parented them incorrectly, and you've already sowed seeds of miscontent, malcontent, malfeasance, everything that you've already sown those seeds. Because guess what? While you were busy fighting each other and not correctly parenting this child, you were in essence parenting them inappropriately. And I believe that being the model that Pastor Henry talked about, and role modeling what it's like to be a parent, is going to be very impactful for that child. Because I tell some of my parents, you are, especially when they treat their parents badly or poorly, I say to them, you are in essence teaching your child how to treat you when they become grown and they have to help take care of you. So you have to model the behaviors you like to see in your children, so that you're not sowing the wrong seeds, because you are sowing seeds, and you do not want to sow the wrong seeds in your children, because you want them to be able to respect you as their parent, even when you become elderly. Back to you, Pastor Henry.
Yes, so I think I saw a question in the chat. So let me just look at it again.
Yes, it is. Is it
It's
advisable for a couple to remain in a broken marriage for the sake of their children?
no, I would not advise that a couple stay in a broken marriage for the sake of the children. But I would advise that you get the marriage fixed, make the marriage hold, and the child would be taken care of. Right? So if you realize that there are aspects of the marriage where the things are broken, go back to your family mission statement. Because oftentimes that's where things go awry. When we started off, we decided this is how we wanted to live. This is what we wanted to achieve. This is how we are going to live. These are our values. And sadly, some people fall in love and get married without discussing those kind of things. And then you are going to have problems, because when you start a journey, marriage is a journey that lasts for life. When you start that journey, and somehow the superficial is worn off, and you realize that we have traveled in the same taxi going well from Port of Spain, and somehow we are close to Uriah Butler. Those who are in Trinidad, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You get to Butler, and then one person says, I want to go to Arima, and the other person says, I want to go to San Fernando. Then you start to have conflicts. Then you start to have real situation. Before you left Port of Spain, before you got into the car together that is called marriage, that should have been decided. And I want to say to individuals who are married, if you have not as yet made that decision as to how you are going to, where your marriage is going in the next 10, 15, 20 years, sit down and do that now, because 10, 15 years is going to creep up on you. And if you do not have that clear vision as to where you are going and how you want your marriage to be at that period of time, you are going to have serious problems. All right. So that staying in the marriage because, or staying in the car because you have a child in the car doesn't mean that you're going to, things are going to be all right for the child. Okay. So that you need to make sure, fix your destination, fix your goal, agree on your purpose. And as may I say that I don't believe in the approach where after the woman has gotten into a marriage and so on, that you pull out that particular passage of scripture, women be submissive to your husband, and so I dictate the rules and you have to follow them. Nonsense. The verse before that, be submissive to one another, must be respected also. So at that case in time, at that place where you are at, you have to listen to each other. You have to feel what each other wants, and you have to feel, and not just feel, but you have to recognize where you're going. And I don't like to use the word compromise, but you need to seek win-win. How am I going to get a win in this situation that is before us? And how are you going to get a win in this situation? It may seem that there isn't, because we are on two sides of the coin, as it were, but there is always a third alternative. And that's sometimes we limit ourselves to black and white, right? And it could either be black or white. Then there are many shades between black and white, many shades, and they're all workable, and they're beautiful shades too. And if you can find one that both of you can agree on, it becomes yours. And so I say to couples in counseling, you always start these situations when you're, in conflicts, when there are different positions and what have you. You start on the premise that we are both wrong. You are wrong and I am wrong. Whatever we agree on, we are both right. So that we need a place where we both can agree and we can say, we are right. This is what the family is going to be. This is what the family. And so there is that thing about seeking healing for the family. There are times, even after you have had your mission statement, there can be difficult moments. You can fall into misfortune, and one person may not be able to deal with the misfortune as the other. I mean, I can't, people blame Job and Job's wife, but I could understand the woman. You are in a marriage, and somehow you lost your children, you lost your land, you lost your animal, and you standing up there, praise the Lord, hallelujah, blessed be. What kind of man are you? The woman is not that level of spirituality and understanding, and somehow you are just bless the Lord. Well, how about me? I am suffering also. My children have lost my children, not just you alone. Your children have been lost. I have lost my 7 children. I can't have any more. And you talking about bless the Lord. Why don't we just curse God and die? You understand where the woman is coming from. And so you need to understand that in the conflict, even though they are disagreeing values, there may be different values, disagreeing positions. We need to come together. Job needs to come down from his high spirituality, and Eve needs to have her mind transformed and be able to see the power of God in all of this. So no, I with the question, yes, do not do it for your children. Do not, if there is hurt in the family, do not just get healed because of the children. Do not stay there and continue to be hurt because of the children. Rather, be healed.
All right. Well, we are at that point.
Mm.
We've shared a lot. We've talked about a lot. And I hope that the audience have gleaned a lot from this discussion today. Just some closing remarks. I'm going to give some closing remarks. I just wanted to encourage you to prioritize communication, having clear communication and mutual respect, even if you are in a separated status. Focus on the child's well-being because that's the important piece. I mentioned some time ago that it's you being a parent is an act of stewardship, and God has loaned you these children to be His ambassadors to raise these children. He's given us the blueprint and how we are to raise them. And it's important for us to read that blueprint and try to apply it. Oftentimes we say knowledge is power. Well, I don't believe knowledge is power. I believe that applied knowledge is power. Let's apply that knowledge to raising these children so that we are honoring God by being good stewards of our parenting. Yes, some parents may experience separation for various reasons, and they may be charged with having to co-parent children. But let us do this to the best of our ability and keep our children on the path that God has ordained for them even before they were formed in their mother's womb, because we want them to be able to finish that course that God has set for them. Pastor Henry, your closing remarks.
Children are gifts from God. They should never be used as a chip to bargain for a better deal for yourself. Sarah did not understand this. Neither did she understand that her animosity to her stepson would live on for over 3,600 years. The Arabs, descendants of Ishmael, continued to war as God had promised. What a curse to live with for poor parenting. You are now pregnant, God would say to Hagar, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone's hand, and everyone's hand will be against him. And he will live in hostility towards all his brothers. Genesis 16:11-2. What a situation that our world is experiencing because two people didn't understand this whole thing about parenting. A woman who needed a child just to have forget what they call it in the games, just to have the rights to be called a mother. And a man who wanted children, but who loved his wife so that he cannot say to her, loved his wife so much that he would not say to her, no, this is not the right way. I think this is God's way. Let us do it this way. Doesn't ever offer a solution to what the wife says. Doesn't offer a suggestion to what the wife says. Bad for the family. And look how it has, I said, more than 3,600 years. It's banned. That's more than 100 generations. And so let us be thankful for the children that God has given to us, and let us rear them in the way that God intended us to do. I think I see Dr. Sutherland is there, so we probably can recognize her. And Pastor Roger Constantine probably can recognize him. We want to recognize him also. Dr. Sutherland, you want to say good night?
Good night, everyone. Listening intently. Words that we know before, but apply to every situation. You always get new meaning. So it's always a pleasure to sit in the audience and listen to your wisdom. So thank you.
Pastor Constantine.
Hi, good night, everyone. Well, the same is here. And I'm listening, taking in all the wonderful wisdom and insights on this whole story. It's a fresh perspective, and then look at it from this perspective before, with the story of Abraham and Hagar, and so it's a very, very, with Ishmael, is a very wonderful perspective, and I'm really enjoying it. And thanks so much for the study and the effort that went into it tonight. Very enlightening. Thank you.
Praise God. Pastor Mark from New York. Is that the same Pastor Mark? I'm seeing a Mark. I'm not sure if it's our brother Mark from New York. Probably not. I'm not getting a response. Over to you, Dr. Neff. Thank you very much for.
All right. Well, we look forward to you joining us again next Saturday for part 4 of the role of separated parents in their children's life. We have more to discuss. We have more to impact on this topic. And we look forward to you coming out and joining us and being part of this conversation. Again, thank you for joining Real Talk Family Life, brought to you by Faith Tabernacle and the group of Caribbean evangelical ministers who are committed to helping families thrive. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much for coming, and have a good evening.
God bless you all. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
All right.
Ah, shit.
Hi, good night, everyone.
Good
God
night,
bless.
everyone.
Have a wonderful service tomorrow.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, bye.
Good night, Pastor. Good night, sis.
Good
Pastor, that
night,
was a
sis.
good night. Pastor, that was a wonderful way of bringing over